Welcome to Broken. It's interesting to know that over 90% of our viewers choose not to subscribe. If this video resonates with you, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Our goal is to reach 500 likes on this post. Share your insights in the comments to stay up to date with our latest stories. Okay, let's move on. There are moments in life that divide us from ourselves, quiet Wednesdays when the air shifts, and suddenly we become strangers to the people we once were. For Claire Morgan, that moment arrived on an otherwise unremarkable afternoon in late September, when the leaves had just begun their transformation from vibrant green to burnished gold. A day like any other, until it wasn't. She had been married to Daniel for 17 years. 17 years of morning coffees and goodnight kisses, of Christmas mornings and summer vacations, of shared dreams and collective disappointments. What had begun as a passionate love affair had settled into something quieter, more subdued, a comfortable silence rather than an electrifying conversation. Claire was 43 now, with fine lines branching from the corners of her eyes when she smiled. Her body had changed over the years, softening in places, strengthening in others. She had grown accustomed to the woman who stared back at her from the mirror each morning. A woman who had built a life so carefully, so methodically, that she hardly remembered what it felt like to be surprised by it anymore. Daniel, with his salt and pepper hair and reading glasses, had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. Perhaps that was the problem. She knew exactly what he would say before he said it, precisely how he would move through their home each evening after work, the specific way he would sigh when settling into his favorite chair. The predictability that had once felt like security now wrapped around her like a shroud. "Do you ever feel like you're disappearing?" she asked him one night as they lay in bed, the soft glow of his reading lamp illuminating half his face. He glanced up from his book, eyes momentarily confused. "What do you mean? Like you're fading somehow? Like you're becoming transparent?" Daniel marked his page and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I think that's just getting older, Claire." He smiled gently. "We all feel that way sometimes, but it wasn't just getting older. It was something else, something she couldn't articulate, a hunger that had nothing to do with food, a thirst that water couldn't quench." That was when Malik appeared in her garden. He came recommended by a neighbor, a landscaper who specialized in sustainable gardens. "He has a way with plants," Mrs. Grant had said. "It's like they respond to him, like they want to grow for him." Claire had smiled politely and taken the phone number, not thinking much of it. Their garden had been neglected for months and years, if she was being honest with herself. Daniel had never been interested in outdoor work, and somewhere along the way, she had lost interest too. The once vibrant flower beds had become overrun with weeds, the hedges untrimmed, the lawn patchy and yellowing. When Malik arrived on that Wednesday in September, she was struck first by his hands, large and strong, with soil embedded beneath his fingernails, the skin of his palms slightly calloused. Hands that knew work, that understood the language of earth and root and seed. "Mrs. Morgan?" His voice startled her, deep and melodic with the gentle lilt of his Jamaican heritage, warm like honey poured over rough stone. She looked up, momentarily disoriented, as though waking from a dream. "Yes," she said, extending her hand. "You must be Malik." He nodded, his smile revealing a small gap between his front teeth. There was something in his eyes, a quiet perceptiveness, as though he could see beyond her careful facade to the restlessness beneath. "Your garden," he said, gesturing to the overgrown yard. "It has good bones. It's just been sleeping for too long." Something about the way he said it made her wonder if he was speaking about the garden at all. In the weeks that followed, Malik became a regular presence. He arrived each Monday and Wednesday, sometimes Friday if the weather was good, and slowly, methodically began to resurrect what had been lost. Claire found herself watching him from the kitchen window as she prepared lunch, fascinated by the reverence with which he handled each plant, each stone, each handful of soil. There was something about the way he moved, deliberately, with intention, that made her aware of how mechanically she had been living her own life. Each movement of his seemed to contain a kind of joy, a celebration of being present in his body, in that moment, in that specific place on earth. "The roses will need special attention," he told her one afternoon as she brought him a glass of lemonade. "They've been neglected, but they haven't forgotten how to bloom." His fingers brushed against hers as he took the glass, and she felt something stir within her, a flutter, a quickening, a reminder that she, too, was alive, was flesh and blood and beating heart. She began to find excuses to be in the garden when he worked. She would bring out a book, settling onto the wrought iron bench beneath the old apple tree, pretending to read while stealing glances at him over the pages. Or she would decide that particular day was perfect for pruning the lavender, though she hardly knew what she was doing, just to work alongside him in comfortable silence. Daniel hardly noticed the changes in the garden, or in her. He came home later and later, consumed by his work at the law firm, his mind always elsewhere. When he spoke to her, it was about practical matters, bills to be paid, social obligations to be met, concerns about their retirement fund. He no longer looked at her with desire, with curiosity, with wonder. Perhaps he hadn't for years, and she simply hadn't noticed until now. The first time Malik touched her, it was innocent enough. She had stumbled over an exposed root, losing her balance, and his hand had shot out to steady her, gripping her elbow firmly. "Careful now," he said, his voice low. "The ground can be treacherous when you're not paying attention." His hand lingered a moment longer than necessary, and when he finally released her, she felt the ghost of his touch like a brand against her skin. That night, as Daniel slept beside her, his back to her as always, she lay awake, remembering the feeling of Malik's hand on her arm, the warmth of his palm against her skin. She imagined those hands on her waist, her thighs, the curve of her breast, and felt a heat bloom low in her belly, a sensation almost forgotten, like a language she had once been fluent in but had slowly lost from disuse. In the cool darkness of her bedroom, with the familiar sound of her husband's breathing beside her, Claire allowed herself to want. The rain came unexpectedly on a Thursday afternoon in early October. She had been working in her home office, trying to focus on the quarterly reports for the small publishing house where she had worked for the past decade, when the skies opened. Through the window, she could see Malik, still working despite the downpour, his white t-shirt now translucent, clinging to the contours of his body. Without thinking, she grabbed an umbrella and hurried outside. "You'll catch your death," she called out, raising her voice to be heard over the drumming of rain against leaves. He looked up, rivulets of water running down his face, and smiled, that same gap-toothed smile that had begun to haunt her dreams. "It's just water," he said, but he stepped under the umbrella with her nonetheless, close enough that she could smell the rain on his skin, mixed with earth and sweat and something else, something uniquely him. They stood together beneath the shelter of the umbrella, their bodies not quite touching but aware of each other in a way that made her breath catch. She could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the rise and fall of his chest, the pulse beating at the base of his throat. "You should come inside," she said, the words escaping before she could consider their implications. "At least until the rain stops." His eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there, hesitation, perhaps, or recognition of the boundary they were approaching. "That wouldn't be appropriate, Mrs. Morgan." The formality of the address stung, a reminder of the roles they were supposed to play, employer and employee, nothing more. "Claire," she corrected him softly. "My name is Claire." Something shifted in his expression then, a softening around the edges. "Claire," he repeated, her name sounding different in his mouth, imbued with a significance she couldn't quite decipher. The rain continued to fall around them, creating a private world beneath the umbrella, a momentary sanctuary where the usual rules didn't apply. "Tell me," he said suddenly, his voice barely audible above the rhythm of the rain, "are you happy, Claire?" The question caught her off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because no one had asked her that in years, not Daniel, not her friends, not even herself. She had been so busy maintaining the life she had built that she had stopped questioning whether it was the life she wanted. She began, then faltered. "I don't know anymore." The truth of it settled over her like the rain soaking into parched earth. She didn't know if she was happy. She only knew that standing here, beneath this umbrella with this man, she felt more alive than she had in years. I should go back inside, she said finally, taking a small step back, creating distance between them. You should come too. Just until the rain stops. This time, he nodded, following her across the sodden lawn toward the house. Inside, the air was still and quiet, the sound of the rain muffled by glass and wall and roof. Malik stood awkwardly in the kitchen, dripping onto the tile floor, suddenly looking out of place among the gleaming countertops and stainless steel appliances. Wait here, Claire said, turning toward the laundry room. I'll get you a towel and maybe one of Daniel's shirts. She returned moments later with a fluffy white towel and one of her husband's button-downs, a pale blue Oxford that Daniel wore to casual Friday gatherings at the firm. Here, she said, offering them to Malik. You can change in the downstairs bathroom. First door on the left down the hall. He took the items from her, his fingers once again brushing against hers, and this time, she didn't pull away. For a moment, they stood there, connected by the small point of contact between their hands. Thank you, he said, his voice lower now, intimate in the quiet of her kitchen. For the towel. And for asking. Asking? If I wanted to come inside. He turned then, making his way down the hall, leaving her standing alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest, her fingertips still tingling from where they had touched his. While he was gone, she busied herself making tea, filling the kettle and setting it on the stove, taking down 2 mugs from the cabinet. Ordinary, domestic actions that suddenly felt charged with meaning, with possibility. When Malik returned, the sight of him in Daniel's shirt did something strange to her insides. The shirt, which fit her husband perfectly, strained slightly across Malik's broader shoulders, the sleeves rolled up to expose his forearms. It was like seeing 2 worlds collide, her carefully constructed life and the wild, untamed feelings that had begun to take root inside her. Better, she asked, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. He nodded, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. Much. Thank you. She gestured to the kitchen table. Sit. I'm making tea. He settled into one of the chairs, his large frame making the space seem suddenly smaller, more intimate. She could feel his eyes on her as she moved about the kitchen, retrieving sugar and honey, slicing a lemon. You have a beautiful home, he commented as she set the mug of tea before him. Very orderly. There was something in the way he said it, not quite a criticism, but an observation that made her see her surroundings through his eyes. The house was indeed orderly, every item in its designated place, surfaces gleaming, everything coordinated and tasteful. It was a house designed to be admired, not necessarily lived in. It doesn't always feel like a home, she admitted, surprising herself with her candor. Sometimes it feels more like a museum. He considered this, adding a spoonful of honey to his tea. A home should feel alive, he said after a moment. Like a garden. Always growing, changing. Imperfect. Is that how your home feels? She asked, curious about his life outside of her garden, the parts of him she didn't see. A shadow passed over his face. I'm still working on that, he said simply, offering no further explanation. They sat in silence for a while, drinking their tea, listening to the rain against the windows. It was strange how comfortable it felt, how natural, as though they had shared 100 afternoons like this. Your husband, Malik said suddenly, breaking the silence. He works a lot. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. The firm is demanding. He's up for partner next year. Malik nodded, his expression unreadable. And that's important to him. It's what he's worked for his entire career. And to you? Is it important to you? The question caught her off guard, forcing her to confront something she had been avoiding. Was Daniel's partnership important to her? Once, perhaps, when they were younger, when she had believed that success would bring them happiness, would fill the growing void between them. Now, she wasn't so sure. I want him to be happy, she said finally, which wasn't really an answer at all. Malik watched her over the rim of his mug, his eyes serious. And what about your happiness, Claire? Who wants that? The question hung in the air between them, dangerous in its simplicity, in its implication. She didn't know how to answer, wasn't sure she wanted to. Before she could form a response, the sound of the garage door opening shattered the moment. Daniel was home early. Panic flashed across her face, though she had done nothing wrong, at least, nothing tangible, nothing that could be pointed to as evidence of her betrayal. And yet, sitting here with Malik, having tea in her kitchen while her husband's shirt draped across his shoulders, felt more intimate than any physical act could have been. "You should go," she said quickly, standing and taking his mug, placing it in the sink. "Through the back door." "Your clothes, I'll get them later," he said, already rising from his chair, understanding the urgency of the situation. "Tomorrow, when I come to finish the stone pathway." He moved toward the back door, but paused with his hand on the knob, turning back to her. For a moment, she thought he might say something, might acknowledge the current that ran between them, the unspoken possibilities that hummed in the air. Instead, he simply nodded, a gesture of understanding, of patience. "Tomorrow," he said, and then he was gone, slipping out into the rain just as the sound of Daniel's key turned in the front door. Claire stood frozen in her kitchen, her heart racing, feeling as though she had narrowly escaped something, or perhaps, had narrowly missed something essential, something transformative. "Claire?" Daniel's voice called from the foyer. "Are you home?" She took a deep breath, composing herself, pushing down the emotions that threatened to overflow. In the kitchen, she called back, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're home early." As Daniel entered the kitchen, setting his briefcase on the counter and loosening his tie, she was struck by how familiar he was, how predictable. She had spent nearly 2 decades with this man, had built a life around him, and yet in this moment, he felt like a stranger, or perhaps she was the stranger, becoming someone new, someone she didn't yet recognize. "Meeting was cancelled," he explained, leaning in to kiss her cheek, a perfunctory gesture that left no impression. "Thought I'd come home, maybe we could order in tonight." She nodded, forcing a smile. "That sounds nice." His eyes fell on the 2 mugs in the sink, and she felt a flutter of panic. "Were you having tea with someone?" The question was innocent enough, but she felt the weight of her deception all the same. "Just Mrs. Grant from next door," she lied smoothly, surprised at how easily the untruth came to her lips. She stopped by to see how the garden was coming along. Daniel nodded, already moving toward the refrigerator, losing interest in the conversation. "Is that guy still working on it?" "The gardener? What was his name again?" "Malik," she said, the name feeling intimate in her mouth. "And yes, he's still working on it. It's a big project." "Well, as long as he's doing a good job," Daniel said vaguely, peering into the refrigerator. "Think we should order Thai or Italian tonight?" As he spoke, Claire glanced toward the window, toward the garden where, just hours ago, she had stood beneath an umbrella with Malik, their bodies close, the rain creating a private world around them. She thought of his question, "Are you happy, Claire?" and felt something stir within her, something long dormant beginning to awaken. "Italian," she said, turning back to her husband. "Let's order Italian." That night, as Daniel slept beside her, Claire lay awake, thinking of Malik, of the way he looked at her as though truly seeing her, of the questions he asked that no one else thought to ask. She thought of his hands in the earth, coaxing life from dormant seeds, and wondered if he could do the same for her, if he could reach inside her and find the parts of herself she had buried long ago. She turned on her side, away from Daniel, and allowed herself to imagine a different life, a different version of herself. Not young, she had no desire to return to the uncertainty of youth, but vital, passionate, fully present in her body and in the world. As she drifted toward sleep, she made a decision. Tomorrow, when Malik came to work on the stone pathway, she would not hide behind her book or pretend to be busy with household tasks. She would meet him in the garden, in the space he had helped to create, and they would continue the conversation that had begun beneath the umbrella in the rain. Tomorrow, she would tell him that no, she was not happy, not completely, not in the way she once thought she would be. But she was ready to be. Ready to feel the sun on her face and the earth beneath her feet, ready to discover what might grow in the garden of her life if she tended it with care, with intention, with love. Tomorrow, she would begin again. The morning arrived with a clarity that felt prophetic, the sky an almost painful blue, the air washed clean by yesterday's rain. Claire woke before Daniel, slipping out of bed and into the shower, allowing the hot water to sluice over her body as she rehearsed what she might say to Malik. By the time she heard the familiar sound of his truck pulling into the driveway, Daniel had left for work, briefcase in hand, his goodbye kiss landing somewhere near her ear, his mind already at the office. She stood at the kitchen window, watching as Malik unloaded tools from the bed of his pickup, his movements efficient, graceful despite the weight he carried. She took a deep breath, smoothing her hands over the sundress she had chosen with perhaps too much care, and stepped outside. "Good morning," she called, making her way across the lawn toward him. He looked up, shielding his eyes against the sun, and the smile that spread across his face made her heart quicken. "Morning, Claire," he replied, setting down the bag of tools he had been carrying. "Beautiful day after the rain." She nodded, coming to stand beside him, close enough to catch the scent of him, soap and coffee and that indefinable something that was uniquely his. "I brought your clothes," she said, holding out the plastic bag containing his still damp t-shirt and jeans. "I didn't have a chance to dry them properly." "I'm sorry." He took the bag from her, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Thank you. And thank you for yesterday, for the shelter, the tea." "It was nothing," she said, though they both knew it wasn't nothing at all. A silence fell between them, charged with unspoken words. Claire looked out over the garden, at the transformation that had already taken place, the cleared flower beds, the trimmed hedges, the new saplings staked against the wind. "It's coming alive again," she said softly. "The garden. You were right about it having good bones." Malik followed her gaze, nodding in agreement. Sometimes all it takes is a little attention, a little care, to bring something back to life. The double meaning of his words hung in the air between them, impossible to ignore. "Malik," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yesterday, you asked me if I was happy." He turned to her then, his eyes serious, patient. "I remember. I've been thinking about it, about how to answer." She paused, gathering her courage. "The truth is, I don't think I've been truly happy for a long time. I've been comfortable, safe, but not happy, not in the way that makes waking up each morning feel like a gift." He didn't respond immediately, giving her the space to continue if she wished, not rushing to fill the silence with platitudes or solutions. "I don't know what that means," she admitted. "For my marriage, for my life. I just know that I want to feel alive again. I want to feel seen." Malik's hand moved then, slowly, deliberately, coming to rest against her cheek. His palm was warm against her skin, slightly calloused from work, real in a way that made her breath catch. "I see you, Claire," he said, his voice low, intimate. "I've seen you from the first day." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly, allowing herself to feel, truly feel, for the first time in years. When she opened her eyes again, he was watching her, his gaze tender yet intense. "This is dangerous," she whispered, though she made no move to pull away. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." And then, with the sun warming their skin and the scent of damp earth rising around them, Malik leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, giving her every opportunity to turn away, to step back, to return to the safety of her carefully constructed life. Instead, she answered by stepping closer, her hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, becoming something hungry, something necessary, like breathing after being too long underwater. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Claire felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, as though pieces of herself that had been misaligned for years had suddenly clicked into place. "Come with me," she said, taking his hand and leading him toward the small garden shed at the back of the property, a place hidden from view of the house, of the neighboring yards. Inside, surrounded by the earthy smell of soil and wood and growing things, they came together again, their bodies speaking a language older than words. Malik's hands, those hands that had brought her garden back to life, now moved over her body with the same reverence, the same attention to detail, discovering the places that made her gasp, that made her arch against him in silent plea. There was no rush, no desperation, only the slow, deliberate exploration of two people discovering each other. In the filtered light of the garden shed, Claire felt beautiful in a way she hadn't in years, not because of any words Malik spoke, though he did speak, murmuring endearments and encouragements against her skin, but because of the way he touched her, the way he looked at her, with wonder and desire and a kind of awe. When they finally lay together on the soft blanket he spread across the wooden floor, their bodies joining in the ancient dance of desire, Claire felt as though she was both returning home and setting out on a journey all at once. There was familiarity in the act, yet everything felt new, the taste of his skin, the weight of him above her, the sounds that escaped her lips, surprised and joyful. Afterward, as they lay entwined, the sunlight dappling their skin through the slats of the shed, Claire felt no guilt, no regret, only a profound sense of rightness, of having reclaimed something essential that had been lost. "What happens now?" she asked, her head resting on his chest, listening to the gradual slowing of his heartbeat. Malik's hand moved lazily up and down her spine, tracing patterns on her skin. "That depends on you," he said. "On what you want." She considered this, contemplating the choices before her. She could return to her marriage, to the safety and security of the life she had built with Daniel, carrying this secret inside her like a hidden garden, a private joy. Or she could upend everything, leave the familiar behind, and step into an unknown future, thrilling, terrifying, alive with possibility. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "Not yet. I just know that I don't want to go back to how things were." "I can't." Malik pressed a kiss to the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "Then don't," he said simply. "Don't go back. Move forward instead, one step at a time." She lifted her head to look at him, at this man who had somehow awakened her from a long sleep. "Is it that simple?" He smiled, that gap-toothed smile that had first caught her attention all those weeks ago. "No," he said honestly. "It won't be simple. It will be complicated and messy and sometimes painful. But it will be real, Claire. It will be yours." In that moment, surrounded by the tools of growth and renewal, wrapped in the arms of a man who had reminded her what it meant to truly live, Claire made her choice. She would not rush, would not act impulsively. She would take time to consider, to plan, to understand what she truly wanted for the next chapter of her life. But she would not go back to sleep. She would not disappear into the role she had been playing for so long. Whatever came next, whether it included Malik or not, whether it included Daniel or not, it would be a life lived fully awake, fully present, fully her own. As the afternoon light began to fade, they dressed slowly, reluctantly, stealing kisses and touches as if to reassure themselves that what had happened was real, not a dream to be forgotten in the harsh light of day. Before they left the sanctuary of the shed, Malik took her face in his hands, his eyes serious. "No matter what you decide," he said, "know that you deserve to be happy, Claire. Not comfortable, not secure, truly happy. Remember that." She nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness but from something else, a recognition, perhaps, of the truth in his words, of the permission he was giving her to prioritize her own joy. They emerged into the late afternoon sunlight, the garden around them vibrant with life, flowers turning their faces toward the sun, bees humming among the blossoms, birds calling to one another from the branches of the old apple tree. It was beautiful, this space they had created together, this testament to what could grow when tended with care and patience and love. As Claire looked out over the transformed landscape, she felt a sense of possibility unfurling within her, like a tightly closed bud finally opening to reveal the beauty hidden inside. Whatever choice she made, whatever path she chose to follow, she would carry this moment with her, this awakening, this return to herself. In the garden of her life, something new had taken root. And she would nurture it, with tenderness and courage, to see what might bloom.